help me in understanding like what is a negotiation, and does it only matters in those businesses, like the sales and networking and marketing?
Well, I think you know the answer to this, but anybody watching can benefit from hearing the fact that negotiation, when you go to the dictionary definition, negotiation is two people trying to reach an agreement. It's not two people fighting. It's not two people beating each other up. Really, it's all a form of communication. And so most people do have the attitude you mentioned of, well, I'm not in the sales world, or I'm not in boardrooms, or I don't sell cars or houses, so I don't negotiate. But the fact is, you are trying to reach agreements all the time with people in your life, at work and at home, whether you're on a public transit and you are negotiating for space so people don't crush you. You are having a negotiation without even saying a word. If you have people at home who you have disagreements with, and I think that is everybody, you are having negotiations with them. If you spend time around children, you are definitely having a negotiation. And for those of us at work, yes, there's a lot of negotiating when it comes to salary negotiations and things like that, but you are negotiating personal boundaries. You are negotiating your stress levels. You are negotiating, your progression in your career. You're negotiating with bullies who are trying to impose their ways on you. So yes, absolutely, it happens everywhere. And it is a life skill. It's a communication skill. If we were in agreement, we wouldn't have to have a negotiation. So life would be a lot quieter if we weren't having these constant negotiations.
Amazing. You're saying like it's happened everywhere, even at house and work culture. But could you tell me like three main reasons on why should we even try to understand and try to learn more about negotiating skills? Like why should someone start improving their negotiating skills?
Yeah, I mean, the number one reason is you are using it every day. So the easy answer is you're throwing money down the drain when you don't. If you are not calling up your telecom company and negotiating a better deal, you're throwing money away. If you aren't negotiating for, when you are getting your car serviced or something delivered or whatever it is, that is money that just disappears through your fingers. There was a study done that looked at people who negotiated their first salary coming out of work. This is way back in 2003. And what they found was only 7% of women negotiated their first salary, whereas 57% of men did. So even men weren't all the way there. Another study took that data a step further and they went, okay, let's compare. Let's compare the person who did negotiate and the person who didn't negotiate. Let's give them the same salary increases and the same promotions for the next 35 years. So that person who did negotiate and that person who didn't, the only difference they have was that first single negotiation. And the average difference in that negotiation was a 7.4% increase. So you might go, okay, 7.4% in one negotiation at the beginning of my career, big deal. But what the study found was when they did that comparison, that person who did negotiate now gets to retire 8 years earlier. So that's one negotiation. That's just your first salary negotiation. How many of those have I had in my lifetime? I've been working since I was 12 for other people. I've been negotiating every single job I've had, every promotion. So imagine how many more years that is. Then you think about the negotiations you have with your partner. Are you just going to go along with the person you live with, whether it's your parents, your spouse, your children? Are you just going to be okay with everything that they say? Now with, we're recording this with the holidays coming up, and I can guarantee there's a lot of folks who are negotiating about where are we going to spend the holidays? What are we going to do for our vacations? Are you going to just be okay with whatever somebody else says? So that is now learning how to advocate for yourself. So advocating for yourself is a skill that you are using daily, and hopefully you want to use even more. I mean, and as I said before, it's about negotiating also personal boundaries. How do you understand how to have a productive conversation with someone? How do you actually avoid arguments with people? So that's the last one. Is so many people assume negotiating is arguing, and I tell people that's not what I do for a living. I help people prevent arguments. I help people resolve arguments. So there's the monetary component of it where you're just throwing money away by not doing it and costing yourself loads of retirement. There's the stress of now having to go along with what everybody else does and not advocating for yourself. Mm-hmm. And then there's also the stress reduction of making sure that you are advocating for yourself and you're creating those boundaries and you're preventing people from arguing with you. There's so many opportunities for you to improve your life.
So in the summary, correct me if I get wrong, the three main reasons would be like first is like, because you're using negotiation in everyday life, like if you're already using it, why not just become much more better in it? Second is like, you can get a better salary, or you can use your skills for better salary, and then you can have better personal relationships as well.
Yeah.
That would be the
absolutely.
That's lovely. Like just now you just mentioned, and I was surprised, like when I read your book, one of the study which you also mentioned now is that women are getting paid less for the same amount of work men are doing. And one of the main reasons is that because they don't negotiate, or they don't participate in negotiation. First, my question is that why is that really? And second, what women can do to get the fair salary of what they deserve?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the reasons truly is that women aren't negotiating as much, but I would say that statistic I gave you is out of date. So the number is increasing. So more and more women are negotiating for themselves. But for those who are still holding back, it's because of the repercussions that so many women have faced when they do try to negotiate. So studies show us, lots and lots of data over the years shows us that women are treated differently in negotiations. There is a lot of bias out there. That is the reason why the gender gap continues to exist. And for marginalized group, it's the same thing. Whether you're a woman, whether you're someone who doesn't fit into the dominant group profile, you are facing bias all the time. And because of that bias, people will treat you differently than they will that dominant group. Over in North America, that's primarily the white male. They're excused and they're expected to negotiate. And so we're okay with that. But when we see someone that doesn't fit that profile negotiating, we go, wait a second, you're greedy, you're bitchy, you're aggressive. It's all of these words that come up because of that societal bias that it's going to take 200 years for us to get rid of. So when women hear those stories, perhaps they were stories of the past, they go, I don't want to negotiate because I'm worried. I'm worried they're going to call me greedy. I'm worried they're going to rescind the offer. I'm worried I'm going to be labeled or put into a corner or be punished in some way for negotiating. So one of the reasons for that is they don't necessarily have all of the tools that I'm trying to provide people with, because a lot of the negotiation teaching that I've been exposed to historically, not all of it, but a lot of it is through one lens. It didn't come from someone who looked or sounded like me. And so I'm trying to make sure that whomever reaches, gets my information, whoever has my book in their hands, I use the analogy in the book and frequently of it's the on-ramp versus the stairs. The stairs work for the majority, for those able-bodied, for those privileged people, but there's people who can't use those stairs. When you have on-ramps everywhere, however, everybody can use the on-ramp. And so the difference is we've been faced with these, privileged stairs stuff all the time. All the books I read when I was coming up, when I was in school, when I was early in my career, I read some of them and I went, yeah, 80% of that works for me, but 20% I go, no. People would laugh me out of the room if I said that. Coming out of my mouth, and now I have loads of anecdotal experience to back that up. And I have loads of scientific data that backs that up. So that's what is holding so many people back from doing it when they're in those marginalized groups. So for women, I would say, thanks to so much of the societal movement that we're seeing, that number is increasing of the women who are negotiating. We have some room to go. And it's because we want to give them the appropriate skills to remove the fear of negotiating. And society has to play catch up too.
Yeah, no, I understand. And what would you say, like, what were some of those 20% of things that you read in book and said to yourself, like, no, these are things holding myself and working against me? Could you share some of those?
Yeah, so there's some stuff like, when I was first starting out, and I tell this story in the book as well, when I was first starting out in my consulting career, and I was taught to do business development and things like that, I was given the advice to be arrogant, go in there being a little bit more arrogant than everybody. And I was like, that might work for a guy like you who is wearing a suit and who's over 6 feet tall and who has white skin and who has gray hair. That doesn't work coming from me. A woman coming in and being arrogant will be punished for that for life. So it's some of those types of tips that just weren't working. Going in and being aggressive, all of those types of things don't work. And I tell people all the time, I am quite firm, but I'm never rude. those things work only for a certain demographic and only for a very limited context. Even some of the tips from, hostage situations, you can't treat everyone like a hostage taker, because that's not realistic. And that is not someone would listen to when you come in a form that looks like me. That's some of the things that come out there. You can't always go in being demanding. You can be firm without being demanding and without being and still be credible. So those are some of the things that come kind of off the top of my head.
I want to ask, what women can do now to make men listen to them? If there are things they are working against it, maybe there's something they can do, and maybe there are some things they have to get the advantages of.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things. One is finding advocates and allies. So I always find someone else in the room who can also speak up for you. Find someone else who can champion you, someone who looks more like them, because that will remove the bias and will help with. They're going to hear it from someone more receptive, or they're going to hear someone else back you up. You're not just one voice in a sea of voices against you. So that, in terms of the context and how you set yourself up in an environment for success, find other allies who will also echo some of the things, who will stand up for you, who will, when you are interrupted, someone can go, actually, I'm curious to hear what else Fotini has to say before you jump in. Find those people, because that's going to make your life easier. Now, those people aren't always available. So the other thing is, in terms of your own skill set, there's two things that come to mind immediately. First is walk in like you own the room. Behave as if you deserve to be there. Behave as if you have already earned whatever it is you're asking for. Odds are you do deserve to be there, and odds are you have earned it. So act the part, and that will send a message to the other party's subconscious that will start to affect how they respond to you without even saying a word. And the other thing, in terms of a communication tool, is I always advise women and marginalized folks, have lots of questions ready. Because if you are part of that group who is going to be labeled as greedy or aggressive or any of those derogatory labels that can often come along with the word negotiation, then by asking questions, you can still be credible, you can still be in control of the conversation, and yet you are still perceived as collaborative instead of overly assertive or overly aggressive. Questions can get you to the same destination without some of the resistance that you might get along the way. And it can actually allow you to be a bit more passive and go, okay, say less, get more. Like, that's the reason why I titled the book the way I did. Ask a question, get them to give you all the information you need to succeed.
Yes, and I especially agree on the second part, like ask questions, because I love asking questions. And I did that. I started doing that because I read that in last year in one of the books, like ask questions, get the expertise, get the ideas from others. But in the first reason you mentioned that enter the room because you deserve to be there. And I know, like, for many women and even for men, this is not an easy task, Yeah. Many would say, like, if I go to any event, like where many of YouTubers are going there, and I also go there, I would, in one end, I know, like, I make YouTube videos, I interview people, like, so I should be there. But on the other end, I would say, no, like, I'm very small YouTuber. I don't know, many people don't know me. So any field, you would always feel like anyone except you who are there is better than you. They are doing much better than you. They are getting much more revenue. They are getting much more traffic. So what advice you would give to them on how to prepare for that situation?
Yeah, it starts with a mindset. So I want you to remember that if you were invited to something, you were invited for a reason.
Yes.
Someone noticed you, right? So it doesn't matter how big of an audience you have or how small. You caught someone's attention for a reason. You are valuable in someone else's eyes. And so when you walk in there, maybe you're not the most senior person in the room, maybe you're the most junior person in the room, but they went, hey, this person should be on our list for a reason. This person should be invited for a reason. And so if you don't reflect that back to them, then they're not going to treat you that way. So you need to own the fact that, hey, I deserve to be here. I might not have their experience yet, but boy, do I bring something else to the table. I bring potential. I bring energy. I bring enthusiasm. I bring an inquisitive nature. I bring a network. I bring something. Focus on what it is that you bring to the table instead of what it is that you are missing. Because too often it's that imposter syndrome that creeps in that goes, I don't deserve to be here. I'm not as good as these other people. When are they going to find? Here we go. So when you've been invited into a room, it's very easy for imposter syndrome to take over. It's very easy for your brain to start going, oh, when are they going to find out that I don't deserve to be here? Or I don't have as much as they do, or I don't have the experience that they do, or I haven't accomplished what all these people have. But this is the point where it's time to quiet your brain and focus on what you do have. This is basic psychology 101. If you don't believe it, why should they believe it? So when you start to focus on, hey, here's the reason why I was invited there. They noticed me for this. They noticed I did a great job. I've got curiosity. I've got experience in something else. I've got potential. I've got appetite for more. I've got a different perspective because I'm younger. I come from a different industry or whatever it is. The fact of the matter is they saw something and you have to see something in yourself as well. So it's almost like if you could take inventory of all the wonderful things that you do bring to the table, forget the stuff they have, focused on what you bring. And that will start to psych up your brain. It'll start to pump you up to start behaving differently too. You will physically look different when you start to think that way. And when you look a way that is in sync with, hey, yeah, I do deserve to be here, they're going to notice that as well. And they're going to be responding to you in a similar way. So they're kind of reacting to how you behave. If you behave like, I don't deserve to be here, then they're going to go, why is this person sitting there and taking up space? But if you act like, yeah, of course I deserve to be here, they're going to go, who's that person? And how will I take notice? So there's definitely things that you could be doing without even saying anything. But first it starts with the mental taking inventory of why you deserve to be here. Reframe it for yourself, and they're going to start to see it differently as well.
Yes, I love it. And especially like in one of your talk, you mentioned that always maintain a power pose, right? Like that's how you attack the others. So, okay, I want to talk more about the negotiation. When you are going with in a negotiation deal, and when you know like the other party has more power, more authority, and they can hold like they have more power of the outcomes of that negotiation deal. Mm-hmm. Let's say like negotiation between employee and employer. So what are some of the things you would suggest someone like we can do for preparation in that kind of situation?
Look, there's always going to be power dynamics of some kind. And oftentimes, again, imposter syndrome kicks in and we assume that we have less power than we do. But when you start to analyze it, the power dynamics can change very dramatically. I mean, I wrote an entire section on my book about power, and we can see from what's been happening in society in the last year that the Great Resignation, or so it's called, thanks to, social upheaval and the economic state of things, has drastically changed the power dynamics between employees and employers. Now, all of a sudden, employers don't feel like they have any power because they're going, I'm losing people. Yeah. People are quitting. They're going for different jobs. What do I need to do to hang on to them? They feel quite powerless. But at the same time, you still have employees who are going, well, why would they hire me after over all of these people? Or, can I really ask for a promotion when, they might fire me or promote somebody else first? It's all in your head first. So when it comes to power, it's thinking it's reframing, is what do I bring to the table? Even with my MBA students, when they come to see me during office hours and they go, look, I got this job offer, but I'm scared of negotiating it. What if they rescind the offer? What if they go to the next 500 people on the list? And I said, but why did they make you number one on the list? Yeah. What are you bringing to the table? And if you handle it in such a way where it's going to be collaborative instead of this demanding, you must do this or else, then, you're just engaging in a conversation with someone. But the other thing about power is it's not just actual power that matters. And I talk about this quite a bit in the book, and I tease this apart. It's perceived power. So we just talked about body language, right? When you walk in the room, you got to look like you own the joint. They'll perceive, ooh, this is somebody interesting that I want to talk to. But that perception is just as important as what you actually bring into the room. They won't know anything about the experience until you open your mouth. But that perception is, this is someone interesting. This is somebody I'm going to want to get to know. So you need to behave in a way that tells them, yes, I am powerful. Yes, I am somebody that you want to get to know. Yes, I am someone that you need to treat credibly in this negotiation. So that perception matters. How you behave makes a difference in negotiations.